Well, people are hopping on, which is absolutely fabulous. And I wanted to honor all the time that you are giving us. So I want to start on time, and if we can, we're going to try to end on time. So I want to welcome you all. I'm Nina Beth Carden, the director of the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights. And on behalf of everyone who works on this wonderful project, I want to thank you so much for joining our Environmental Rights Amendment stakeholder meeting. We are grateful you've chosen to join us on this MLK Day in this particularly auspicious week. And we invite you all to write your name and your affiliation, if you wish, in the chat so we can know who you are. You can introduce yourselves to each other, and so we can feel like we are a community, and maybe even feel like we're kind of meeting in one room together, person to person, so we can begin to remember and anticipate the reality of in-person gatherings, hopefully, which is just around the corner. The goal of the Environmental Rights Amendment is to place in the Declaration of Rights of our state constitution an amendment that assures that all of us, equally and fully, have the right to a healthful environment. In truth, the environment does not establish this right. Like many other civil rights, this right is inalienable, conferred upon all of us at birth. The amendment, rather, would establish the legal protection and enforcement of that right. This is not a new idea. 6 states have had such language in their constitutions for over 40 years. Several more are working on crafting them right now. The General Assembly of the state of Maryland itself asserted this right in 1973 in its Maryland Environmental Policy Act, which says, quote, "Each person has the fundamental and inalienable right to a healthful environment." And MEPA goes on to say that this policy to protect the environment on behalf of the people of the state of Maryland is, quote, "a matter of the highest priority." But as we all know, despite these lofty words, and despite the progress our state and legislature have made, this policy has not exactly enjoyed the highest priority for the past 47 years, and it is time to correct that. For the truth is, everything depends on the well-being and regenerative nature of the environment. Our health, our economy, our food supply, our ability to conduct our daily affairs, as COVID is showing us. Indeed, the very functioning of a just and peaceful and equitable society depends on a healthy environment, which is why it's appropriate for us to gather tonight as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In March of 1966, Dr. King said, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." Knowing what we know about the connection between the environmental health and our personal and public health, and the inequity and environmental degradation, which contributes to inequity and health impacts, I believe it's fair to expand on Dr. King's statement and say, of all the forms of inequity, injustice in environmental health is one of the most inhumane. So by placing this amendment in our Constitution, we proclaim that everyone, equally and fully, has a right to a healthful environment, and that this right sits amid the pantheon of all other constitutional rights. And so we are so glad you are with us on this journey. We have a wonderful group of presenters this evening to fire us up and to get us ready for the fight ahead. And I want to invite you to write any questions and comments you might have in the chat. We hope to get to them toward the end of the call. And if we don't, really, we will try to reach out to you and answer your questions in the days to come. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Delegate Wanika Fisher. Delegate Fisher represents District 47B in Prince George's County. She received her law degree from Dickinson School of Law, served as Policy and Community Director of Prince George's County Council, 2014 to 2016. She was Assistant State's Attorney in Prince George's County in 2017. She is currently Assistant Majority Leader and an unwavering champion of justice, equity, and due process, and the lead sponsor of the Environmental Rights Amendment in the House. Delegate Fisher, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you, Nina, for your, Nina and Claire are really, I should call them the twin pillars of this movement and the energy behind this amendment. So I'm very excited and thankful to work for them. And then I have to thank my dear friend and colleague, Vaughn Stewart, who was on the call, who convinced me in his many ways to switch sponsorship. Vaughn Stewart sponsored this bill last year, and he thought it would be a good fit for me. So I wanted to definitely thank Vaughn for his leadership in the environment and on social justice issues, and entrusting the House journey with me. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. And of course, I want to thank all my staffs on the call as well for all their hard work. You know, we can't really make it happen without other people. It's really poignant that today is MLK Day. I know when we were talking about kind of having a stakeholder call and discussing what's going to be happening with the bill and the hearing upcoming, there were concerns about it being on MLK Day, but something that resonated with me is that if anything, we should be doing the work to enlist his vision and make it a reality. And you know, we're not there yet as a nation and a state, but every year I feel like, you know, we are making small progress, even with the big setbacks and issues that have gone on in the last 3 years. I think they only highlight the disparities that have been here. It's not anything new. And so I'm super, super excited to be sponsoring the bill. I think that environmental justice and social justice go hand in hand, and the healthcare impacts, particularly in my district. So for those of you who don't know Prince George's County, we definitely like to brag. But some of the things that we can't brag about, we can brag that we have the most Democratic votes in the entire state, which you just saw. But the thing that we can't brag about is our healthcare disparities and our environment. And I want to be bragging about that. And so in my district, I'm the northernmost part of the county. I touch Montgomery County. I'm right near Langley Park's in my district. I border the University of Maryland. I have the Anacostia River. We have batching plants up on the northern side by the Bladensburg part of the district. So when environmental impact is stated, we are feeling it. I mean, if you're by the batching plants in the Bladensburg area, like our local church has to sweep the stairs Sunday mornings when they could meet in person. And so the residents throughout my district, my sub-district, and the entire district are really feeling the ramifications of our environment and all of the things that go with that, whether that's air quality, water quality, and the like. And you know, something that we don't talk a lot about in Prince George's County is the amount of dialysis centers there are. You can see a lot of things, but if you actually start paying attention to it within Prince George's County, you'll actually realize how many like dialysis centers there are. And that just really shows you the healthcare impact that it's having on the Black and Brown community, that we need so many within our community and county. And I think that this bill will enable the environmental impact be a part of everything that our state does, and that it's actually a right for every single person, not just if you and very frankly live in a white middle or upper class community in the state of Maryland. And so I think that is super critical to me. It's critical to my residents. I think that sometimes with the intersectionality of race, gender, and a lot of things, it's not always the number one topic. If you had to say, what's the number one topic for the Black community right now? Obviously, people would say housing, police reform. There are a lot of other type things, right, that are going on. But the environment is slowly killing us. It's not immediate. And when you have all of those intersectionalities going on, it's really, really hard in your own community. And I know the Reverend on the call will also talk about this. It's hard to have something be your number one issue that you're championing when your children are just being shot in the street, right? And so allies like many of you on this call, many of you that identify in different communities, it's so important that we uplift this issue and make this issue happen, and also claim the urgency of it, not just for ourselves, but for our next generation to not have the health issues that, you know, I'm like a statistic. I'm an African-American woman. I'm this status. I have asthma. Like, you know what I mean? It's, you know, you just end up in that sort of realm of what are your health expectations because of the environment that you're in. And so I'm just really proud of the bill. I think it's going to do really, really well. I think that Delegate Stewart and others have been really strategic in sort of giving it a facelift this year. I think it definitely has a different vibe with me. And then I know I don't know if Senator Patterson's on the call now, but is joining us later. But Senator Obi Patterson is the cross-file in the Senate. And having the two of us sort of want to put this bill forward definitely gives it a different texture within the legislature, and we're really excited about that. And we're both from Prince George's County, but Senator Patterson is from the total opposite end. So he's all the way in South County, has a lot more land, less high density as I do. So we're actually very, very different districts, but within the same county. So I don't want to talk too long, but I definitely think today is very poignant for us to discuss this issue. I'm here to answer any questions that you have, anything I think on like the political end of what's going to actually happen with the bill as we go forward. And I'm just really, really happy that all of you took the time of your evening to be here to make it important, because it really, really is. And legislation really can't move alone. And so we're going to need everyone on this call's help to make this a priority, especially given the kind of session that we're in. But I really think it could get there, if not this year, next year. And it's just critical for our community. So I want to say thank you. I feel like that was long. I apologize for the length. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. We're going to put your questions in the chat so we can get to all of them either now or later. Delegate Fisher, thank you so much. We love your passion, right? We love your dedication to this. We know how important this is to you, and we're just thrilled to be partners with you in all of this. And as you referenced, Delegate Vaughn Stewart is with us. He was the lead sponsor of the Environmental Rights Bill last year, and is a lead co-sponsor of the bill this year. He is one of the most passionate and powerful environmental voices in the General Assembly. Graduated from NYU School of Law in 2014, served as an intern for the White House Domestic Policy Council, served as policy director for Jamie Raskin for Congress in 2015. And I know that we all both extend our condolences to Congressman Raskin on the loss of his son, and we wish him Godspeed on the task that lies ahead of him. Delegate Stewart was elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in 2018. Although, given all that he's done and all the bills that he's worked on and his impact, you would think he's been there for 20 years. We are so grateful for you for continuing to support and endorse this bill. So, Delegate Stewart, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Nina. That is a far too generous introduction. Thank you for your tireless advocacy on behalf of this issue for so many years. Maryland, his entire state, because we all obviously drink the water and breathe the air, I think are forever in your debt. And I also want to give a hearty good evening and thank you to Delegate Fisher, who has really taken the baton on this bill, as you can see, and run with it. She is going to be a really, I think, powerful voice for this bill. And I also want to thank Senator Patterson for taking over. But Wanika is one of my closest friends in the General Assembly and has really been a passionate advocate on a number of issues that impact her constituents. And she's the first, I think I almost have like in my head emblazoned in my memory, Wanika saying the phrase "my district," because there may not be anyone else in the General Assembly who is more grounded in the needs of her constituents and always bringing things back home to the folks in her district than Wanika. And so I appreciate that about her, but I also really appreciate her taking this on, because I think that our chances are good with her. And I think that folks listen to her and folks respect her. And I'm really optimistic about the bill's chances going forward. But I just wanted to chat a little bit about sort of my perspective on the bill in terms of where we've come from on this, you know, what the journey we've been on trying to get this over the finish line the past couple of years. As Nina mentioned, my name is Vaughn Stewart. I represent the middle part of Montgomery County in places like Aspen Hill and also in Leisure World. But I'm actually originally from the state of Alabama, and I come to this issue on a really personal level. I've had cancer twice at a young age. I had cancer twice before the age of 30, in all likelihood because Monsanto used my hometown in Alabama as a dumping ground for PCBs. And so my hometown has been registered as one of the most contaminated, toxic places ever recorded in human history. It's called Anniston, Alabama. And the PCB contamination levels are the highest ever recorded in world history. And the cancer that is most tied to PCB exposure is the cancer I had in 2017, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So I can't, prove a causal relationship there, but in all likelihood, Monsanto, gave me cancer. And so these issues around kind of human health on the one hand and corporate profits on the other are really visceral and really important to me. And I think that is exactly the discussion we're having when we talk about the Environmental Human Rights Amendment. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves whether we think that human health and environmental quality and sustainability is more important than a few large corporations' profit margins and a few wealthy people's pocketbooks. That's the ultimate question that we have to ask ourselves around this bill. And I think that, it is really appropriate, as Delegate Fisher said, that we're here on MLK Day. And I wanted to quote, everyone loves to quote Dr. King on the day. And I think he has a really powerful quote that I think is a good reminder to all of us about what we're dealing with when we're talking about this bill. He said, it really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one destiny affects all indirectly. Obviously, he is far, far more powerful or eloquent than I'll ever be. And so you get extra bounty points when you quote him. But I think it's also important to remember, whether it's MLK Day or not, that we've got to do more than just quote people that had the right ideas, right? We actually have to we have to do more, honestly, than do acts of service, which is great. And I know a lot of folks were able to help out virtually, but we've got to create policy change and we've got to create structural change if we want to really honor Dr. King and his and all the other people, all the other fighters for justice across American history. And so, I think that what really is most powerful to me about the bill is pretty simple, which is that when you don't have a constitutional protection, courts are going to be reluctant to reverse the worst of the executive, legislative, or private sector decisions that create environmental degradation. That's the bottom line. Constitutional power and protection is sacrosanct in Maryland and the United States legal arena. And so if we are serious about clean air and clean water, the only logical result of that is that we take it seriously and constitutionally. And the other thing that I think is really powerful about this bill is that we as a Maryland General Assembly only meet for 3 months out of every 12. And so if there is a decision that's made on any level, executive, private sector decision, something that's coming down the pike that is clearly going to be devastating for the environment and for human health, the legislature, really as proven by this last year where there were, these myriad crises and our hands were tied, we're not a fast enough acting body to be able to block a lot of the worst excesses that could come. And that's why I think putting in a constitutional fail-safe option so that Marylanders can exercise their right and protect themselves and protect our environment in court immediately and get immediate injunctions is so, so crucial. We cannot rely on the General Assembly to come in on our white horse. We simply don't meet enough. And I think the other thing that people oftentimes misjudge this bill on is that this is not a radical idea at all. The idea that folks have a right to a healthy environment, number one, I think is common sense, but it's recognized not only by several states, but it's recognized by nearly 80% of countries. And there have actually been studies that have compared the countries that have these sorts of rights enshrined in their national constitutions with countries that don't. And there have been, the studies have very clear outcomes that basically, the ecological and environmental degradation in countries that have these constitutional provisions are much lower. And so I think that, the benefits are clear. I think that the question that we have to, the issue that we have to overcome is just the litany of counter arguments that people posit that I find specious and unconvincing, but that are embedded into the brains of, unfortunately, a lot of Delegate Fisher and my colleagues that we have to overcome. And so I just wanted to close by talking a little bit about what has stalled this bill in the past and what we kind of have to overcome if we want to pass it in the future. I think the number one issue that folks have a hard time dealing with is the idea that we as a legislature would be relinquishing our authority to judges, to unelected judges. This is hard for legislators to wrap their heads around because everyone is parochial and territorial about their own power. And I think folks have a hard time with the idea that we would give up some of our power or our authority over environmental decisions to unelected judges in some sort of unpredictable way. But I think, and I also think that implicit in that is almost they feel threatened that, or even criticized the idea that we need this. The implicit assumption of that is that somehow the Maryland General Assembly has in the past not acted according to strong environmental principles, which I don't think is necessarily true. I think Maryland has been very good, if not a national leader, has been quite good on the environment. But I also think that having this sort of constitutional fail-safe put in really has no downside. I also think that we can't always predict the trajectory of how the General Assembly or the governor is going to go. I mean, who would have thought we would have elected a Republican governor 3 times within like 5 election cycles? And the reality is that even some of Delegate Fisher and I's colleagues don't necessarily see the light on these issues, either because of, campaign donations that they get or just the circles they run in. They don't see the urgency around these issues. They don't see the climate emergency for what it is. And so even though they have a D next to their name and maybe they vote the right way every once in a while, doesn't mean that they aren't susceptible to some of the industry arguments about this project or that project. But then I think, the last counter argument I think that is worth mentioning, and then I'm happy to answer questions, that we have to figure out a good counter argument to, is that folks, basically say that this is, that this is going to be too vague. This is too vague to really be useful, or that it's redundant because we already have a lot of laws in the books, or that lastly, that, this is going to cause just like a flood of litigation and our state agencies are going to have to be rebuffing this. And that's why I think it's really important for us to become as familiar as we can about what's happened in Pennsylvania and Montana, which is that all of these grand cries of how this environmental rights legislation is going to cause the end of civilization as we know it, and our courts will be overrun, and everything will go to hell in a handbasket, have just not at all borne out in any of the jurisdictions, whether it's in the United States or whether it's internationally at all. Positive outcomes have resulted, but all these negative outcomes that all the critics claim will flow into these various states or regions have just not materialized. There's not been a flood of litigation. And actually, the provisions have not proven to be too vague to be useful. In Pennsylvania, they've actually proven to be extremely useful. So I would just close by that, which is that while Maryland is trying to be a leader and becoming one of the first states to have a full-throated environmental rights amendment in its constitution, we're not literally the first. And so we need to remember that and always keep in mind about these other states and exactly what they're doing, because that's going to be our most powerful case to make to those who serve in the General Assembly with Delegate Fisher and I, is arguing that no, in fact, these other states have had a successful history with this exact amendment, and it has not been as crazy or as nightmarish as the critics might suggest. So with that, I know that we're happy to take questions, but again, I want to thank Nina and I want to thank all of you. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone, and it's a pleasure to work with Delegate Fisher on what is now her legislation. I'm very, very optimistic.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you. Again, do write any questions in the chat. And Delegate Stewart, thank you for that charge. There will be significant opposition to this. We can answer all of the questions that, that the opponents have. So we just have to make sure that we stand firm, and working with you and Delegate Fisher and Senator Patterson, I think we're going to make a wonderful stand, and we are making great progress from last year. I think we'll make great progress this year, and either this year or next year. We're going to get this thing passed, which is fabulous. I am now delighted to welcome Senator Obie Patterson, who represents the District 26 in Prince George's County, as we heard. He has been in public life longer than one of the people that we invited to this panel has been alive. So he is one of the stalwarts, the senior members of our elected official community. He is deeply committed to helping youth, to strengthening schools, to opening opportunities of jobs and education for all. And I want to give a shout out. I want to put something in the chat. He was part of, is this the right one? Let me make sure we got the right. Yep. He was part of the Senate President's Advisory Work Group on Equity and Inclusion, and they just put out their report. So take a look at that report, which is fabulous. And so Senator Patterson, if you would like to say just a few words, and we thank you so much for your leadership here. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Nina. And Nina. And good afternoon to all. I do apologize for being a little late. I'm sure you guys probably discussed a little bit about the letters that's been flying around from various organizations about not supporting the legislation. And I'm saying, if they had done that job in the first place, maybe we wouldn't be at this stage in life in terms of trying to make changes. I mean, if the state Environmental Justice Committee had just been about the business of meeting once or twice a year, I think we would be at a better position than we are here. So I'm not disappointed. I sort of expected that to happen. I think we just got to go all out and take them to them and see where we end up. I think we can get it through. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but most of the things that I've championed in my life has not been easy. So this is just one more to add to the push, if you will. So I appreciate Delegate Fisher. She got away on me, but I think we have a hearing coming up sometime pretty soon. Too bad we didn't get a switch from my committee, Education, Health, and Environment Committee, in lieu of going to Judiciary first. I didn't like that, but they were very adamant about it and not willing to give an inch in terms of reassigning it back to Health and Education Environment. But it is sort of co-equal. We will get our shot at it, but it will be after Judiciary Committee has made a decision on how they plan to deal with the piece of legislation. So this is a wonderful group. I didn't know we had such a powerhouse group of folks. Yeah, a group, good setting here that's ready to help us move this legislation through the General Assembly. And I'm still optimistic that we can do it, and I'm willing to continue to fight for it.
You lead us and we will follow you. We are there for you. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We really so appreciate your leadership. So thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Delegate Eric Barron, who is also a co-sponsor with us. He's from District 24, Prince George's County. Prince George's County is our new best friend this year. So we love you guys. And we thank him for his belief in this cause and for supporting this amendment. So he unfortunately could not be here this evening. So now I am thrilled to introduce Rosa Hance. Rosa is the chair of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. She's the youngest person ever to hold that position. She's a fierce advocate for environmental health and justice. She graduated from the University of Maryland with an honors in the honors program with summa cum laude, something I never achieved, with a bachelor's degree in art history and Spanish. Her professional experience ranges from being a Spanish teacher at a high needs high school to managing a local maritime museum store in Southern Maryland. Seeing a need in the community and the political climate for a focus on environmental stewardship, she transitioned to making volunteer advocacy work and motherhood a full-time commitment, and how you manage 2 full-time commitments in one 24-hour day. I don't know, but anyway, Rosa, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all tonight and to meet the bill sponsors and all of the stakeholders. And I'm really proud too to be testifying on Wednesday at the in the committee on behalf of the over 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club. We are going to be urging passage of the Maryland Constitutional Amendment for Environmental Rights. And it's such an amazing day to, an evening to be here today, thinking about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and the legacy of the Civil Rights Amendment and the movement and the intersection with the environmental movement. I think Delegates Fisher and Delegate Stewart and Senator Patterson have really framed this up so well. And, I'm sitting here and I'm kind of reflecting on how we as a country and a society have come to have a heightened appreciation, maybe even in this year, particularly of the constitutional protections and our fundamental rights and the continual struggle in our society to balance one's individual liberties with the needs of society as a whole. While our nation was gripped by the struggles of recognizing the racism embedded in our institutions and fighting against the mounting demonstrations of white supremacy, we valued our rights to peaceably assemble and proclaim loudly that until Black Lives Matter, all lives matter cannot ring truthfully from our lips. And during the last 4 years of this presidency, plagued by violent white supremacist rhetoric, undermining our basic democratic principles and our freedoms, those of us who have sought to resist this whole time have particularly valued our free speech and free press to share the truth and conduct open political dialogue. So now as we face the growing climate emergency, we need to reckon with the effect of our own human society has had on the Earth's air, water, and abundant biodiversity. We would be remiss in not recognizing the impact that the environment has on our own bodies and our health and our very survival. So during COVID-19, we've seen the disproportionate burden of health impacts on communities of color. We've seen and we know that race and not class is the #1 indicator of where a polluting industrial or power generating facility is located. We know that almost 90% of Marylanders live in areas with unhealthy air as designated by the EPA. We know that transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gases, and we know that the effects of redlining have had on communities of color in highway construction projects. We know that the 5 remaining coal burning plants in Maryland in 2019 produced less than 10% of our power, but over 50% of the carbon dioxide, over 75% of the nitrous oxide, and over 90% of the sulfur dioxide. We know that the connection between coal and chronic health conditions like asthma and other respiratory issues. And we know that these conditions are a drain on our health and our lifestyle and our bank accounts. Using personal and family savings to breathe. And now we know asthma, for example, to be a common comorbidity with a raging global pandemic. We know that in Baltimore, and in Montgomery County, the incinerators are huge environmental justice issues. The University of Southern California have shown studies that prove that cleaner air leads to healthier children. It seems obvious, but we have even, science has documented this. So how then shall we protect our future generations from the health implications of environmental racism? How should we remedy? Hey, buddy. How should we remedy these underlying issues? And we see them in our flooding cities, on our coastal state, with a fragile democracy. as our planet is warming. There's evidence and there's precedent that a constitutional amendment will enshrine environmental rights into law, that this law would be both effective and legally prudent. So as Delegate Stewart was sharing, that there have been studies that show that this amendment is not the anathema that some folks would like to believe that it is. I wanted to provide a couple of references here. The New York State Bar Association's Environmental and Energy Law section published a detailed analysis and recommended the adoption of a constitutional right with the state as a trustee of the natural resources, just as we've done here, as is proposed in this amendment. And then a descriptive analysis of 142 national constitutions in a Yale workshop provides some insight into the constitutional environmental rights, as well as the extent to which countries are taking human rights seriously. And I underscore this to emphasize, right, what I was saying at the beginning. If we are taking, as a nation, our environmental rights seriously, we will also be taking our fundamental, all of our fundamental rights seriously. To see that we are one of a literal handful of holdouts is a national embarrassment, and we should not be waiting for this right to be enshrined in the US Constitution. We need it here in Maryland, and for Maryland to join among the leaders across the country to value and to codify this right to a healthful environment into our Constitution. I think about the ways in which I've been involved in advocacy through the Sierra Club in the past couple of years. And in the judicial system, you know, the only opportunities that we have to weigh in is when someone is bringing a complaint to the forefront at a time when they're asking for a new permit, you know, to have air pollution in, you know, some toxic facility. Why can we not raise these issues with the courts before then, right? Why can't the fundamental underpinnings of our Constitution be to support the people who breathe air, who drink water? That's all of us. So I'm really pleased to be here this evening and to hopefully help be a champion for this amendment that's going to protect all of us and the earth. Thank you.
Fabulous, Rosa. Thank you so much. We are honored to have the Sierra Club supporting us and having your personal passion and advocacy behind us as well. So we're very, very grateful. All right, we're going to try to get in two more presenters before the top of the hour. And I am thrilled next to introduce Barry Hill. Barry Hill is an environmental lawyer who lives in Montgomery County. He is an adjunct professor at the Vermont Law School. He is a visiting scholar at the Environmental Law Institute. He served as director of the Office of Environmental Justice at the EPA from 1998 to 2007. And he is the author of several influential articles on the need for constitutional environmental rights. I have read many of them, and I am more convinced every time I read it. And I was already convinced in the beginning, but it convinces me even more as I read his articles. I'm honored to say that Barry is also a member of the advisory circle of the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights. And I am delighted to say that he has brought blessings to my life. So Barry, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Nina. Since we are celebrating MLK Day today, I would like to show you why Dr. Martin Luther King would support our efforts. Dr. King, he was about human dignity. So let's take a brief trip down memory lane. You will recall that throughout many civil rights marches led by Dr. King, marchers carried placards that simply said, "I am a man." Look at photos of the historic 1963 March on Washington. Look at photos of the April 1968 March of the Black sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. Those photos of the thousands of those placards they say so much about the message of the man who was leading those marches. But what exactly was the message of those placards? Well, today I looked at Wikipedia in preparation for this Zoom meeting. And it says, "I am a man" is a declaration of civil rights, often used as a personal statement and as a declaration of independence against oppression. I think Wikipedia is wrong. I believe that those words meant something entirely different to the marchers and to Dr. King. To them, those words meant respect my human dignity, respect my humanity. In Memphis, for example, the Black sanitation workers were paid wages so low that many of them qualified for welfare. On rainy days, Black workers were sent home without pay, while white workers remained on the job. After carrying heavy tubs of garbage that leaked water and maggots onto their bodies, Black workers had no workers' compensation. An old garbage truck malfunctioned and 2 Black workers were killed. The workers went on strike for 64 days. Yes, it was a labor dispute, but it was much more than that. Dr. King was involved. The message that I am a man was succinct and relatable. Basic human dignity, basic human rights. Dr. King said, "America is at a crossroads of history, and it is critically important for us as a nation and a society to choose a new path and move upon it with resolution and courage." In 2021, Maryland is at a crossroads of history, so to speak, because many of its Black, brown, and poor citizens are demanding clean air, clean land, and clean water. Those are basic human needs. Those basic human needs must be the first priority of the state for all Marylanders. As you know, Flint, Michigan is the current poster child for environmental racism, environmental injustice. Last week, the former governor of Michigan and other officials are facing criminal charges for exposing the 100,000 people of Flint to lead in their drinking water. In a January 14th article about those charges, Latricia Adams, the founder of Black Millennials for Flint, said, and I quote, "Thousands of city residents, most of whom are Black, were denied the basic human right of clean water." Imagine for a moment if Michigan had an environmental rights amendment like the proposed Maryland Environmental Rights Amendment. I submit that the actions of the state officials would have been quite different. In conclusion, let me share with you Dr. King's words at Oberlin College in 1965. He delivered the commencement address. He said, "Let nobody give you the impression that the problem of racial injustice will work itself out. Let nobody give you the impression that only time will solve the problem. That is a myth, and it is a myth because time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. Somewhere we must come to see that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. Without this hard work, time becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. So we must help time and realize that the time is always right to do what is right." The Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights and other dedicated individuals and organizations are imploring our representatives to do what is right, to choose the side of the future, to choose the side of progress, to support the human right here in Maryland to clean land, clean air, and clean water. Now is the time to act. That would be consistent with Dr. King's legacy. Thank you.
Amen. That was wonderful, moving, inspirational, and now is the time. And we're going to move forward together. So thank you so very much. And I am delighted now to introduce Reverend Dellyne Hinton. Reverend Hinton is the pastor of Gwynn Oak and Arlington Lewin United Methodist Churches, now united into one church, I understand, in Baltimore City. She chairs the Central Maryland Ecumenical Council. She is currently matriculating toward a doctorate of ministry at the Ecumenical Institute of St. Mary's Seminary with an emphasis on eco-womanism. So just in case you think she's doing this just part of her professional work, this is her personal passion, pursuing what is just and right in environmentalism and environmental health. And she's been a constant supporter of the Environmental Human Rights Amendment from her earliest days. I'm delighted to say that Reverend Hinton is a member of the Advisory Council of the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights, someone whom I have been blessed to know and work with and learn from for several years. Reverend Hinton, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Nina Beth. This evening, I just want to tell you why I'm in support of this bill. And I support it because every one of us should have a right for a healthy environment. It is a fundamental right as any other civil rights protected by our Constitution and should be protected as such. Indeed, without the essentials of clean air, clean water, healthy soil, without the security of stable climate, all other rights are jeopardized. As the chair of Central Maryland Ecumenical Council and the pastor of Gwen Oak and Arlington Lewin United Methodist Churches in Baltimore City, I am keenly aware of our call for creation care. Each of the 9 denominations participating in CMEC recognizes environmental rights as a fundamental to their understanding of creation care. As a Baltimore City pastor, I recognize that many of my constituents do not own their homes, and therefore they may not have a direct impact on the environment. But their right to clean, healthy environments must be recognized and preserved. As a parent and as a grandparent, my struggle with respiratory issues has been real. Both my sons contracted lead poisoning, and it came from the ground, not from the buildings. It came from the ground, and we were residents of Baltimore City at that time. As these issues become more and more real in our environment and concerns for our children and the effect that it has on them in long term, it becomes imperative that we settle on protecting the rights of all to have clean air, clean water, good soil, and a good climate, stable climate. Central Maryland Ecumenical Council represents 9 denominations in Maryland. One of the fundamental tenets of our faith is creation care, that God created the earth, that all inhabitants may have care from those that he has entrusted to care for them. It is a reciprocal relationship. We care for the earth and the earth cares for us. Creation care becomes climate or environmental justice when we have not maintained our end of the covenant. In 2016, the United Methodist Church adopted a Caring for Creation, a call to stewardship and justice resolution. And it states, confronted with the massive crisis of the deterioration of God's creation and called to a ministry of reconciliation between God, humankind, and creation, we ask God's forgiveness and commit ourselves to a new way of being that integrates environmental, economic, and social justice. This resolution expands and incorporates the environment with the human condition and God. This reflects the need to take a holistic view of the creature, creation, and creator paradigm. This view is reflected in the following statement. We advocate for equivalent environmental standards among countries entering into trade agreements so that creation and communities are not sacrificed in the name of free trade. We must begin at home. And my home is Maryland. Clean air, clean water, healthy soil, and a stable climate ensure not only our continued existence, but the continued existence of our home. And when we extrapolate that out even further, it is not just our home in Maryland. What we decide to do with this environmental human rights amendment will affect all of the states around us, therefore the Mid-Atlantic region. Our efforts will make a difference in the entire community, in the entire United States, and in the entire world. We must begin ourselves doing what we know we are called to do. This is the stance of more than almost all of our Christian organizations. And we all recognize that we have been placed in a covenant with God to do more than just merely reap the benefits of creation. We are to care for our creation and make sure that we are all whole. So I am very honored to be a part of this and to continue to strive towards equity and equality, justice, and a safe environment. Thank you.
Fabulous. Reverend Hinton, fabulous. Yes, the earth has taken care of us for so many years, and now it is our turn to take care of the earth, as you say, so it in turn can take care of us again. Thank you so much. I know you have to run because you've got to talk to the Sierra Club volunteers. Thank you so much for making time for us, and thank you for inspiring words and for supporting us for all these years. We are thrilled again that all of you have been here with us this evening. In the last 8 minutes or so, we want to be able to open it up to some questions. I want to turn this over now to my counterpart, my partner in the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights, our communications director, and the person who has made much of this possible, and that is Claire Miller. Claire.
Thank you so much, Nina, for your partnership and leadership in this effort. So I'm just going to share some of the wonderful questions that have come in the chat. The first question is from Ann Wilson. Would love to know 1, 2, or 3 key wins that similar constitutional measures have brought about in other states. So Nina, do you want to take that one?
You want me to take that one, Delegate Stewart? Do you want to take that too, or you want me to start?
Go for it. You can start.
Well, Montana and Pennsylvania have the most robust environmental rights amendments. In Montana, it stopped mining and sludge polluting a river. In Pennsylvania, it stopped the state legislature from telling all local municipalities that the fracking industry could come in and frack wherever they wanted. It gave the right back to the municipalities. This is, I think, a very important issue. People might want to represent this environmental rights amendment as the people against government. In fact, in Pennsylvania, and I believe also Montana, but certainly in Pennsylvania, it is the government often that has used the environmental rights amendment to protect its own ability to do its due diligence to protect the environment. So in Pennsylvania, it also provided the opportunity for funds that were coming in to the state from fees and services of actually to get the fossil fuel company fracking on public land, which they can still do in Pennsylvania if no one wants to stop them. Those funds that are coming in, those fees for using public lands, were going into the general fund. And because of the Environmental Rights Amendment, those fees now have to go to environmental budgets to preserve and protect and enhance the environment. So those are just 2 examples. I don't know, Delegate Stewart, if you wanted to offer any others.
Well, that's well said. I would actually like to just add the counterexample, which is that there have been several lawsuits brought under the Environmental Rights Amendment in both states that failed, that I think should have failed. And they're good examples that this amendment is not just going to run amok and halt any project that's ever going to be attempted. I think that's an argument that a lot of the opponents of the bill like to make, which is that if you put one of these amendments in place, you can never get a new development. No buildings are ever going to be built again because they're all going to be hung up in court. But if you look at the case history in both Montana and Pennsylvania, you'll see that a lot of borderline frivolous lawsuits have been filed under this and they failed. And I think it's a good example of how courts are actually pretty good at this. They can identify the meritorious lawsuits that clearly fall within the text and those that don't.
So The next question is from Randy. I've heard that the Maryland Association of Counties, MACO, has been one of the barriers to getting the amendment enacted. Is that still the case? And do you have any recommendations for countering the opposition?
We have not yet heard from MACO or MML this year, the Maryland Municipal League. I am anticipating that they will again come and say that this is detrimental to their interests. I just began reading the fiscal note, and again, the fiscal note also says that this could have a fiscal implications for governments because of a floodgate of litigation. I think it's very important that we say that will probably not happen. 2 years ago, we had the University of Maryland Environmental Law Clinic look at 4 states that have such provisions in their constitution, Montana, Pennsylvania being among them, and Illinois and Hawaii. And none of those states ever saw a floodgate of litigation. As Delegate Stewart said, the courts are very good at throwing out nuisance suits and making sure that only suits that are appropriately using the amendment, use the amendment. There was not one case that the students could find when the cause of action for the suit. So it's not one lawsuit that the students found when the cause of action for that suit was solely the amendment. The amendment was always an enhancement to a suit that would already have been brought. And in fact, in Hawaii, 8 years after the amendment was put in the Constitution, the legislature had to pass a law encouraging the population, the citizens, to use the amendment, to use that provision by saying you can recoup your legal fees if you win, because in fact, not enough people were in fact using the amendment. And Hawaii government wanted that amendment, that provision, to be used to enhance the power of government to police the protection of the environment. So there will be no, chances are there will be no floodgate of litigation.
So the next question is from Susan Meyer. So she had written Chris West's office about the amendment, and his response was, it would be unusual for the General Assembly to consider a constitutional amendment in 2021 because there will not be an election in 2021. Most constitutional amendments come up for consideration in an election year. How appropriate is that response?
You want me to respond, Nina?
Please do.
Or I don't know if the senator wants to and his colleague. Well, it is typical that constitutional amendments are brought up the year that it's going to be on a ballot, but the reality with the unique time we're in, as we are all sitting here on Zoom, I think that there might be an opportunity, and I believe I'll let Senator Patterson also comment if he feels so, that we could get this done this year. And it's also important, even if this bill takes a 2-year process, that you actually file and work for it this year, so it actually has a fighting chance next year if we don't get it fully across the finish line this year. So I think Senator West's response was accurate a little bit, but I also think that we're at an unprecedented time where the legislature is in a position to want to move and make bold statements. So it would be a very missed opportunity for all of us to not pursue this bill 100% this cycle, is what I would say.
Senator Patterson, did you want to offer?
I guess the only thing I could add to that is simply that indeed, we are in an unusual time period here, and a lot of focus has been put upon us as those who represent the people, if you will, to do something about disparities when it comes to health care, to do something about the lack of opportunities, particularly for Black and Brown and other people in the counties and in the state. So I believe that we should hold firm, that we should not let this be a deterrent in terms of stopping us from doing what we want to do. I just believe that land, we're not saying that we're gonna vote on it now. I mean, we just asking, as I understand it, to permission now to sort of get it on the ballot and get it ready so that we could, am I right? Don't vote on it in 2022, is that correct?
Correct.
So what's wrong with that? I mean, to me, that sounds like good planning.
That is great. Claire, back to you.
So we are at the top of the hour. I just want to say three things. If we didn't get to your question, we are going to save all the questions from the chat and try to get responses back to you. So thank you for asking all the questions. In terms of actions, for those of you on this call, if you're not currently signed up with the Maryland Campaign for Environmental and Human Rights for email updates, Nina has put the link to do that in the chat. We invite you to sign up. And then the second thing is, if you haven't written your individual state legislator, we also have a letter campaign going, which is also in the chat. And we would love to have you follow us on social media. And I'm going to turn it over to Nina to close.
I just want to thank you. I want to thank our sponsors, Delegate Fisher, Delegate Stewart, Senator Patterson. We couldn't do it without you. You lead the way, as I said, and we will be right there behind you, with you. You can see we had a wonderful turnout this evening. So I thank all of you who took the time to be with us this evening. I know these are difficult times. They are times when there are so many demands on your passions, your interest, your energy. And we are so, so very grateful that you are with us on this. Thank all of my wonderful speakers tonight. Ethan, I thank you for being there in the wings, even though Ethan, just give a wave, Ethan, so they can see who you are. Ethan, a wonderful student at Towson University who was also going to speak, but we did run out of time. We need you all. We're not going to get this done without you. One of the notices in the chat was that we have to bring this to a high priority. I don't think the challenge of this bill is going to be that there will be a lot of people who are opposing it. There will be some who are opposing it. I think the biggest challenge to this bill is making it a high priority. There are so many granular bills that sound more compelling because they provide measurable outcomes. And those are very compelling for legislators. They're very compelling for the public. It is much harder to say that this bill is compelling when it's somewhat vague in people's minds. They're not quite sure how to measure the benefits of it. But as you heard tonight, there are so many potential benefits that this bill will bring, not least that it will change the very attitude and expectations of government and public alike. If we all know that we have a fundamental right to a healthy environment, we behave differently. We expect different kinds of behavior from the government. We expect different kinds of behavior from business. We expect different kinds of behavior from each other. This is a bill that changes the culture, changes the DNA of how we function. And that's why it's so compelling. And what we have to do is make it feel like a high priority. And that is the way we will get it passed. And once we get it past the legislature, which by the way is 3/5 in both houses, so we need a lot of work, we will get it passed at the ballot box. You cannot see a statement which says that you have a right to a healthy environment and vote against it. I mean, how do you do that? So just help us get it past the legislature. We will get it passed in the ballot box, and we'll only be able to do it with all of your help. So thank you all so very much. Have a good rest of MLK Day. His spirit guides us. And may the inauguration this week go peacefully, and may it bring healing and renewed strength to our country. Thank you all. I hope to see you on Zoom around Annapolis, wherever we can be together. Thanks so much.